Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I'm continuing to work on those reels Scott sent in. He sent a lot that, well, they just lend themselves to being videos. And this one is the Abu Ambassadeur. It's the 4600 C4. This reel was made in Sweden. And we're going to take it apart. We're going to show you how it's made, how to service it, and how to keep this one running. This has a narrow spool. It's ideal for inshore casting. It works very nicely, and it's a relatively well-made reel that's going to last a long time with the right service. So we're going to start by taking the reel apart, and to do that I start by removing the exterior pieces. As I do, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel, and if you subscribe to my channel, please hit that notification button. That way you'll see all of the reels that I'm working on, and you'll be able to make a determination whether that's one that you want to watch. This reel service is from Scott. Scott sent in a whole host of reels that he's purchased locally at flea markets and that. And I've had the pleasure to work on some very interesting reels of his. And this one, well, I work on a lot of Ambassadors, but I don't think I've done a video on this one, so that's where we're going with this. To get the handle off, you need to remove this E-clip. It sits right on the ridge of that gear post. And when I take pieces and parts off, particularly the small ones, I like to use a parts tray. In this case, it's the bottom of a fast food container. And all the pieces and parts I take off of will eventually make it into that tray. And hopefully they eventually make it out of that tray. Because when that tray's empty, it usually tells me, well, I've installed all the pieces that I took off, or I lost them, one or the other. Hopefully it's that I installed them. All right, well, you saw that the handle came off, and then there's a tension washer that goes between the handle and the star adjuster, and then we can remove the star adjuster. This back pedals in a counterclockwise manner, and the reels that are even numbered, the 600, 4600 in this case, those are typically reels that you crank to retrieve with your right hand. And if you have a 4601, an odd number, typically they will crank with the left side of the reel. That goes back a long ways. I just worked on a reel for Scott. It was the Mitchell 301 spinning reel, and sure enough, the reverse is true there, but one is designed for left-handed folks and the other for the right-handed folks. We're going to take the 3 screws out. I break the screws with a screwdriver, and then I like to work them out with my hand. That way I don't risk injuring any of the threads, and also I get a feel for where that is. So we should be able to remove that side plate now. You have the side plate, you have the spool. The axle is actually held in by a clip here, so let's get that piece out. This clip is what's holding the axle shaft in, so don't be afraid to think that maybe you broke something when you did that. You didn't. It just, there's a little ridge on the end of this axle shaft right here. Maybe you can see it. That little indentation is gripped by a plastic part, and it holds that to the adjuster cap there. That goes into my parts tray, as does the other pieces there. And, well, you're going to see that there's not much going on in the back of this reel. You can take that side plate off if you like. I'm just going to do a light cleaning here, but you can see that the reel is clean inside. You have a idler gear which transfers the power from the spool to the worm drive, and if you turn this, you're going to see that this worm drive is going to drive the line guide to make that section work. All right, well, it's all clean under there. We can put a little bit of grease into that bushing holder in the back there. And you don't need to grease that idler gear. You could put a drop of oil on a pivot point in the center, but you don't need to grease that because it's plastic. Plastic is self-lubricating. While I have the frame open, I'm going to remove this cap for the pole, and hopefully remove the pole as well. Just tapping it. Sometimes if you can tap it gently, you'll get it to come out of its case. Sort of like that. And if you, I like to remove the pole because, well, just like this pole, you can see that there's a buildup of some stuff right on the shoulders here. And you need to make sure that's clear because those greases can dry and then you get a pole that's not working properly, and eventually will jam in the system. All right, well that one's nice and clean now. So we're going to reinstall that, and then we can move on to the main attraction, if you will, which is getting the internal gearing on this reel serviced. Just going to use the pliers. You need to kind of work to get that back into the hole. And that's not properly installed yet. That's got to go all the way down. So just hold your finger on there, turn that line guide, and eventually there you go. Eventually you will feel it kind of work in there. All right, let's probably just knocked it out. I did. I'm going to take that cap, reinstall the cap. I'm going to do that by hand as much as I can. Move it over to the side, and then we can bring this down. And once you tighten that cap up, just make sure that you didn't over tighten and it's not stuck. This is fine. And the last part of service on this back end of the case then is get some oil onto the worm gear. I don't like to use greases on that, because greases can trap particles, and that's just not going to be any good. This should come off, and there's a bearing underneath there, so make sure that you oil that bearing. And I believe there's a bearing on this side. There is. So we can just go ahead and take those off. I'm going to go ahead and put this back on. This is the drive that's going to drive the rest of the spool here. Now at this point you can grab that shaft, clean it off, light coating of grease. You don't need to put a lot of grease on here, but a light coating of grease. And let's just slip that shaft through the spool, line it up through the other side, and right now we can just take care of putting that all on the frame, or in the frame. Not necessarily an easy trick here, but just be patient. Eventually you will get it. There we go. All right, that's it. These are brakes for the spool. If you want the spool to slow, you pull these out. If you want it to speed up, you push them in. They're currently set in the in position. 2 more screws are going to hold the rest of this assembly on. This assembly is a case or a gear side plate with a bridge plate underneath it. And the insides of these reels by generations do not change much by model. So if you've worked on one Abu of a particular model, like this is the C4 generation, if you worked on one, chances are you can work on all of them. Most of the differences on these reels tend to be that they are wider spools, narrower spools, that kind of thing. You do not service the anti-reverse clutch other than making sure it's clear and free of dirt, debris, and grease. Grease will impact the performance of that. Next, we're going to remove the collar that the anti-reverse rides on. We're going to remove the gear shaft and assembly. We're going to remove the jack. This is a little pressure fit here over a post, but it's just a piece of plastic. Just need to put a wider screwdriver to help me with this. There you go. You want to be careful with the plastic parts. You don't want to break them. That's your jack. We're going to remove the yoke. And while we're at it, we might as well remove the trip lever and the stud piece. So we'll be down to a bare bridge plate. And if you've taken off all the pieces and you don't know how it goes back together again, well, this is a good starting point for you to learn that or see it. If you're here in a help me rescue mode because you started something that you're not quite sure about how to finish, that's okay. I encourage people to do it themselves. That's why this channel was established. And hopefully you're servicing your own reels, giving them a second chance and keeping them going. Well, for whatever reason, this one's just tight and coming off. There we go. All right, so this is your bridge plate. these are your parts. So we're going to make sure that everything's clean. That's how you service a fishing reel. You want to make sure they're clean. You want to inspect all the pieces and parts to make sure that there's no damage to them. And then you want to re-lube, reassemble, and get that reel back out there fishing again. So right now I'm just using a paper towel because that's about all that's necessary. If you have some stubborn grease, go ahead and use a penetrating oil like this one. That'll help dissolve the grease. And then I always like to use the least abrasive method of removing any dried greases and the like. And if I have some corrosion or some other issues that are involved in this and I need to do some more, well, then I'll just kind of step up. The first one would generally be like a Scotch-Brite kitchen pad, scrubby pad, and then move on to like a 4-0 steel wool if necessary. I don't get any more abrasive than that. All right, so let's show you then kind of how this thing starts coming back together. This is the hole for the trip release mechanism. Put a little bit of grease on the back end of that. Then we can just line that up over that stud. I don't know why we're having a little bit of trouble there, but we are. All right, now we have that trip release jack. Again, the same thing, make sure it's clean. A little bit of grease onto the back or it's going to ride. And that jack hooks onto the stud on that trip mechanism. So that's how the trip mechanism sets itself in there. All right, next up then we're going to clean up the jack and the pinion gear, or the yoke and the pinion gear. I always get these terms confused. So here's your pinion gear. You want to inspect this. Just check all the way around, make sure that those teeth are uniform, that they have the same distance and gap between them, and it's not bent and chipped. And then go ahead and put a nice coating of fishing reel grease on there. I use Penn Precision reel grease. I don't recommend one way or another the greases because I'm not that partial to any of them, but please make sure that it's a fishing reel grease. When you go to install the yoke, you're going to notice that there is an angled side on the yoke that goes towards the spool, as does the opening on the pinion gear, like that. So this one has been serviced and greased. It's going in here, laying over it, just like that. Next up then, we're going to take care of the spring tensioner. That's going to go over the top. Remember we worked a little bit on that one that came off the post. So just be careful as you're reassembling it. It'll snap in easy enough. And you know you have it installed properly when one side of the clip is on each part of the yoke assembly there. Alright, best part then is just the drag assembly itself. This is nice and clean. This is your trip lever. There's a little bit of grease there. Let's get that off. Pay attention. There's a little copper washer. That little copper washer belongs on the bottom of the gear post. Just like that. That's nice and clean. There's no lubrication required on the trip side. There is some greasing to be done on the gear shaft itself. So put a light coat of grease on there. Now we've got our assembly. This gear is nice and clean. Check the teeth of the main gear just like we checked the teeth on the pinion gear. And while I'm doing that, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you maybe want to know the history of the reel, or maybe you're stuck putting something back together again, it doesn't have to be this reel. I work on all kinds of reels, spinning reels, ocean going reels, freshwater reels, bait casters, you name it. If it's out there, I work on it. And you're basically seeing whatever it is that comes in my shop. So if you have a question on a reel, maybe you're stuck, go ahead and leave it in the comment section. I'll be happy to respond to you. These appear to be Carbon-Tex washers. Carbon-Tex washers do not require lubrication, so we're just going to put them in there dry. If you do choose to lubricate a Carbon-Tex washer, use a little bit of light dry grease and then wipe it off. Just keep it relatively dry. First washer that goes in is the Carbon-Tex. Second one is a round one. Looks like this with a a hole that's rectangular inside. That's called a keyed washer. That's the next one. Do not use this one. It has the bell on it. That's the last washer. The other one is flat. Second of the carbon text then. Now we're going with what's called the eared washer. It's got the 2 points on it. That sits in the cavities of the gear itself. You can see how nicely it fits right in there. Last of the drag washers then. This is the bell washer then. That's the cap. And then we put the collar on. It's going to interface with the anti-reverse gear and keep that one nice and tight and in place. Well, we're pretty much ready to reinstall the side plate here. So I'm just going to clean out whatever light greases may remain in there. Flip it over. Line up those 2 holes with your posts. Slide it on. And just make sure that it's a nice, clean, and crisp fit, and that you have a nice sealed case on both sides. With that, we have those 2 little screws. I didn't put those in my parts tray. Most of the time, I'll put all of my pieces and parts into that tray, but I knew I was coming right back to that one, so I left those on the table. Sometimes not a smart thing to do. You can have an oops moment anytime. You might brush them off to the side, they may fall down, and well, then you got a major oops on your hands. All right, that's the one. Grab the other. So you need to be careful if you're buying the modern Ambassadors. Not all of them are made in Sweden. There's a lot of these that are made in China, and just be aware that experience kind of shows that there is a difference in the reels. So I would encourage you to, if you're just looking for the base entry reel, it's probably made in China, not to worry about it. But if you got a desire to own one made in Sweden, make sure that the reel says made in Sweden. If it doesn't say made in Sweden, well, it's kind of like the pen reels in the US. If it doesn't say made in the US, it's not. Okay, we've taken care of that. Got a little clip here, but before we get on to that, let's put the star adjuster on. I think I want to put this on right now because it's hard to put that on behind the star adjuster. Now we can put the star adjuster on. So Scott sent me a bunch of reels. He found a lot of these out at the flea markets in California. They've been a pleasure to work on. They've been some good candidates for videos, since some of these I haven't done before. And even the ones I've done, I kind of tend to repeat myself because, well, I think I'm getting a little bit better at it. And sometimes if you don't see a particular view on one of the ones I do, if you search my channel, you may find that I did another one. And that would always be helpful to you. Maybe you get the right view. I've been trying to do a little bit better with the close-ups, but that doesn't work all the time. All right, we have, the next step would be the handle. Oh, next up would be that little tension washer that goes underneath the handle. Now the handle can go on. Now we need that little E-clip. Remember that one? That was one of the first pieces we took off. That goes in the groove on the bridge post. And be careful with this thing. This one little thing shoots. They're annoying. And if you lose it, well, you got a week waiting for a replacement part. That's on. The cap goes on next. You need to make sure that the cap is going on square. This is another case where I like to use the hand tightening, because if you cross strip this, you're going to ruin the threads on the bridge post. And if you ruin the threads on the bridge post, well, like I just said before, you got another week waiting for a replacement part. And they get expensive, so just take your time, be careful with them, and do your best not to ruin them. All right, we've got the little retainer clip on. We got a screw here that's going to hold all of that down. So if you're like Scott, if you have some reels that you've been fishing with that need some tune-ups, you're not interested in doing it yourself, maybe you don't have the time, That's appreciated. Go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to try and give you the information for repair. When you go to set this aside, now you're going to notice that there is a hole right there, right below the mounting hole, that's going to accept this little post from your bridge. So when you go to set this up, that the thumb release needs to be in the up position. Then go ahead and line it up. Target those holes, get your 3 screws through, and then make sure that you mesh all the way in. Okay, nothing left to do but test now. So let's go over what we did. We took the side plate off. We serviced the non-gear side. We mentioned that the Teflon pieces in there do not need the lubrication, but that does need to be cleaned. These were cleaned. We also put some oil into that bushing holder. We opened up the spool. There's bearings on both sides of the spool. Those got serviced. And then we came over to the main gear side plate. Once you remove those 3 screws from the frame, you had 2 more screws that sit on the yoke. We took everything down to the bare back end of the bridge, and then we cleaned, inspected, re-lubed, and reassembled all of that. And we're just ready to go give it a test now. So the first thing we want to test is, well, did we make sure that we got aligned with the free spool? Let's press that down, nice click, free spool. The spool is turning easily. Does it reset when you clip? Well, there you go. We're in clip mode now, and the handle is turning when you turn that spool. We have an instant anti-reverse. We cleaned that up. We showed you not to grease that, just to make sure that it's clean and dry and free of debris. We've serviced the drag washers. We'll hold for that. And that's nice and tight drag washers. And a very nice easy spin. We took the pawl out. We cleaned the dirt on the shoulders of the pawl. We oiled the worm gear and the pawl assembly itself. This one's ready to go back to Scott to go fishing again. So I hope you've enjoyed all of it. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our first responders and essential personnel for everything it is that they're doing during the pandemic to keep us safe. To everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.